Hi guys, yet again, I'm feeling inspired, it seems. I wanted to talk about human rights for a little while. I did a video, I did plenty of videos about rights and why they exist, but I'm gonna make a video about how human rights don't exist. I wanted to show you guys this.
Is if you are an alternative person, punk, goth, however you classify yourself in the alternative community and you support Trump, no, you're fucking not. No, you're not. I have never been the type of person that's like, well, if you don't listen to this music, you're not goth, you're not punk. I'm not that type of person. But if you don't have the same fucking values, the same fucking common sense when it comes to human rights, you're not alternative. Let me be very, very clear.
She can see two locations at the same time. I actually had something prepared. I was gonna make a special video, but I guess it's a good as time as any. So you see this alternative person, this poor soul that is lost and let's say probably chose the path of the demon worship because she herself felt, let's say, marginal and not able to participate in normal society. That's why she talks about alternative people. It's like she is dehumanizing herself without realizing. But anyway, I wanted to talk about the myth of human rights. If you ask a lawyer to explain to you human rights, they'll give you a speech about how sovereign countries can sign treaties and are expected to honor them. But imagine this scenario. A corrupt president signs a treaty with a foreign nation that is not in the interest of the people. A new president is then elected and wants to break the treaty. Why couldn't he do it? Does a nation have to honor any agreement that somebody makes on its behalf? By the way, this also applies to loans. It applies to national debt. Why can a president, let's say, take debt for, I don't know, 100 years, like President Macri from Argentina did almost a decade ago? Does a single term president get to legislate what his people will do for the rest of time simply because he signed a treaty with a foreign nation? Not only that, like signing a treaty with a foreign nation from, let's say, the modern way that we look at laws, um, the treaty itself, the international treaty, is just below the constitution. So it's above the local law. In that way, let's say the executive branch would be taking power from the legislative branch to sign in a law without needing any input from legislators. So basically, a president could like make a treaty with a foreign leader, and it would in fact be a new law in that country. Yet nobody within a democracy, nobody within within the system had any input for it. So you see how that's already undermining the principle of democracy. So let's say Western countries tend to say they place international treaties just below the Constitution, like I was explaining, above laws that the Congress passes and above state or provincial laws. This is how you know that human rights are a lie. Not only are they not democratic because they bypass Congress, but there is also no world government to enforce them. Human rights are an Enlightenment invention because in order to guarantee rights, you would have to, in that sense, govern the whole world. You would be implying that international law was just as legitimate as, let's say, a sovereign nation's law. From a real politic, from what we call in international relations, the school of political realism, this is impossible. Like within realism, we do not recognize, let's say, any kind of treaty as being anything but, let's say, an agreement of parts that could be transitory. It does not have, let's say, the same legal and authority standing. It doesn't have like the same standing as laws that the monarch gives, because two monarchs can break the treaty whenever they want, whenever it suits them. Like I said, the fake moral outrage about human rights is just public relations to dominate you culturally and rob you of sovereignty. Only corrupted and feckless intellectuals can defend such a ridiculous notion because it gives them power. Since there is no sovereignty involved and countries can always go back on treaties, there are no international laws. They simply are not real laws, nor can they grant rights in any meaningful sense. But they are meant to familiarize us with the concept of a world government. That's why they were created in the first place. So it's the idea that bureaucrats can fundamentally legislate all of the world if they simply get together, bandy, and impose their laws on other sovereign nations. That's why they say, "Oh no, you're violating an international treaty." So what? So what? If you're sovereign, you don't need to honor a treaty when the conditions have changed. Only God will judge that, not a bureaucrat. Lawyers use needlessly complicated and contradictory jargon to mystify and obscure what is really happening. Written law is nothing but a barrier to pretend that justice is blind and that politics or personal beliefs don't affect its operation in order to protect the politicians, the legislator, the bureaucrats, and the enforcers. It's just a spell to try to give their drive to power a form of legitimacy. So there's already been studies on that. That's why laws are needlessly complicated in terms of their wording. It's meant to grant the priestly caste special powers to interpret it. Not only are human rights a scam to create a new world order, but they exist as an intellectual cudgel to legitimize the exertion of political, economic, and military pressure on enemies both abroad and at home. So here is the meat and potatoes of the subject. You can only guarantee treaties if you are the strongest party. Even then, you cannot, let's say, guarantee that the treaty will be upheld in the manner that you want. So you see that international law actually requires, let's say, there to be a global power to support it and, let's say, use threat of force to enforce that those so-called rights are implemented abroad, which is basically a denial of the concept of sovereignty. You have to be stupid not to understand it. Stupid or evil. States and modern politicians that claim to want to defend human rights and who champion that rhetoric abroad, that fund and de facto preside over the international forums, are the very same ones to break them if it suits them. Does anybody believe that the US would bend the knee if the UN denounced their transgressions? No, the US doesn't care at all if that would happen, and their allies similarly would do little to distance themselves. It's not even a well-meaning but ineffectual facade. It's a weapon for lawfare and soft power. First, these so-called laws are a public relations tool to justify their own selfish ventures abroad. Second, imagine a tyrant signing in a law that nobody can keep nor anybody else enforce in order to give themselves a claim on anyone they fancy. Like I'm the sovereign. I declare a law. You cannot keep that law. I made a ridiculous law. Now you're on the ropes because you have broken the law. So now I've given myself a pretext for using my discretionary power whenever I see fit, because I can use that law to say, oh, whenever I want to, by the way, oh, you aren't keeping that impossible law. I guess I have to put you in jail if you don't do whatever I want you to. So even if they were a hypocrite, since he's the one with the sole power of prosecuting, then they have created a justification if they ever wanted to use it. So it's meant to lend legitimacy to the actions of the already powerful to justify foreign incursions in the name of humanitarian ideals. Somehow there's this group of experts that spin up a tale to try to force a foreign sovereign nation to conform to their ideas. What a strong and self-respecting ruler would bow down to such a silly concept? Like, who would? None. Treaties are made, and when they cease being in the national interest, they are dissolved. This is why this idea of democracy is in direct contradiction with international law, while at the same time seems to be a necessary ingredient to be distorted and historically related to this globalist ambition. Like these concepts, they cannot be separated, and yet they're contradictory. They depend on one another, and yet at the same time they undermine one another. And this is how you can understand that our current world is a fundamental lie. The public eats it all up because we've been propagandized since we were children and maddened. People now believe that we can just proclaim something as a right because we heard it somewhere by someone who claims to have authority. They believe they can expect to have their demands met because of an ideal or a piece of paper they've read, as if brandishing a paper, making a fuss, or trying to shame others would work. Is it any wonder that a lot of people are insane and feel that their delusions need to be legitimized by the rest? We need to wake up. We are being ruled by lying devils. Our leaders are not only ignorant but also immoral, and they covet power to enslave us. They have already enslaved most people in the West with their idiotic ideas. We need to change before it's too late. So anyway, those were my thoughts. Anyway, I'm I'm ending this stream. Mr. Werfel says yes, yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching, man.